uprising in Syria, and we're talking to Dr. LMadu, who has given us some information in terms of the relationship of Syria with the countries that surround it, and how it appears to be almost, it would be very, very difficult in terms of bringing any kind of real pressure onto Syria. Dr. Madu, let's pick up at that and give us some more revealing truths in reference to this.
As I was saying, Jordan doesn't want to get involved because its own population is almost half, three-quarters Palestinian. And those Palestinians believe Jordan is their own country. They don't want to go anywhere. In 1970, Yasser Arafat and the Palestinians wanted to take over Jordan. That's how Black September came. It was September 1970 when King Hussein crushed the Palestinian rebellion in Jordan. So King Abdullah would be very, 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 very reluctant to get involved in any way for fear of Syria arming those Palestinians to start
a war against him.
against his own regime.
Yes. That's sad.
I mean, that's correct. So he doesn't want to get involved. Now Iran is very close with Syria. They're the two closest, partners in that part of the world. Ahmadinejad supports, have Bashar Assad 100%, because like I said before, Bashar Assad is Alawite, the ruling class, which is an offshoot of Shiite. And the Shiites in Iran see them as the same, as
part of their own.
Part of their own. So they want to have what I might call a Shiite crescent in that part of the world. Shiites rule Iraq right now, So, the Iranians are fully in support of Bashar Assad. So if there's any conflict in Syria, expect Iran to help Syria. Financially and militarily to fight back. So that's very important. Now Iraq is now ruled by the Shiites. Before under Saddam it was Sunnis who ruled Iraq. And remember that the majority of Muslims in the Middle East are Sunnis. Okay, so now the Shiites also run Iraq. And they have a special affinity too with the Alawites who run, Syria. So they are keeping quiet and keeping their nose out of the problem there because they have their own internal problem. Okay? Yeah, they have their own internal problem in Iraq. So if the Iraqi government comes out now against Hafez Bashar Assad, a lot of the Shiites in Iraq will wonder, hey, why are you turning against our own brother across the border? Okay, he doesn't want to do that. And moreover, the Shiites in Iraq would be uncomfortable for the Sunnis in Syria to take over. Because the Sunnis, if they take over in Syria, they might start funding and supporting the Sunnis who are still fighting against the Shiites in Iraq. Okay? Yeah, so the government in Iraq, being led by Shiites, might be very reluctant to start fooling around, supporting the rebels who are Sunnis. They've just toppled a Sunni regime in Baghdad, and they don't want under Sunni regime on their border that might start supporting the Sunni insurgents in Iraq. Now Turkey, Turkey is a special case. Turkey has been the most, fervent in opposing Hafez Assad. They've given sanctuary to the Syrian National Council in Turkey, started arming them and all that. And in fact, their Prime Minister, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has criticized Assad harshly.
Open the borders to them.
Exactly, open the border to the rebels to cross and all that. But what is happening is that Turkey has its own problem. Turkey has its own Shiite problem. The Alawites, who are in Syria, are also in Turkey. In Turkey, and then you have another group called the Alevis. The Alevis are an offshoot of Shiites too. Now what happened is that the Alevis and the Alawites have united, even though they were quarreling before, have united about 15 million strong of them in Turkey out of a population of 70 million. Now they say, okay, well, Erdogan, you are telling us, Assad, human rights and killing people. Now we want our own rights fully, like the ones you're supporting over there. Okay, so that's the trouble now. The Turkish government is coming up to those people are rebelling against them. Say we need the same full rights. You can't
that you're trying to give over
there.
That
you're talking over there. We don't have it here. Okay, and not only that, Turkey has had the Kurdish problem for long, like Iraq. You have Kurds in Syria. You have Kurds in Iraq. You have Kurds in Iran. You have Kurds in Turkey. All of them want their own independence. Okay? Now, none of those countries want to give them independence. But Turkey, the Kurds have been fighting the Turkish government for long. In fact, their leader, Abdullah Öcalan, was the one who was captured in Nairobi, Kenya a few years ago and sentenced to death, which kind of brought down the rebellion quietly. But the Kurds are still there looking for trouble. So the Kurds in Syria and the Kurds in Iraq and the Kurds, they might unite and start creating trouble. Or even Bashar Assad might start supporting the Kurds in Turkey to rise up against the government. So Turkey has its own problem. See, that's a very important thing to understand. That's why the war in Syria might, affect all the regions. Lebanon is a special case also. Like I said before, Lebanon has been under the tutelage of Syria for long. Syria does not recognize Lebanon as an independent country. And the Hezbollah is being armed to the teeth. It's the strongest guerrilla group in the Middle East. Now, it's being armed to the teeth by Iran through Syria. Arms come from Iran to Syria. Assad pushes it to Hezbollah. And so they use the Hezbollah as proxy to fight Israel. Syria won't go and fight Israel directly or Iran, but they use Hezbollah to fight Israel.
See, they support them, give them financial support, arms, and etc.
To fight Israel.
So Iran becomes much more difficult of a problem if you think in terms of the relationship that it has with all of these other countries.
Absolutely, and even Hamas, who rule the Gaza Strip now, in the Palestinian Authority, their leaders live in Damascus. They live in Damascus. They are being funded, financed by Syria. Okay, so all these, factors have a very big implication for what happens in Syria. Now, the Christians, don't forget the Christians. The Christians in Syria are very influential, just like they are in Iraq. Now, the Christians, if you ask the Christians, whom do you support? Oh, no, we don't want Assad to go. Okay? The same way the Christians in Egypt, I know when Mubarak was in trouble, when I talked to the Christians, they say, oh, no, we want Mubarak to stay. Why? Because they are scared that whatever comes next is going to be a threat to them, their independence and economic independence. Now in Iraq, 3/4 of the Christians have fled because all the businesses that the Christians, that Saddam didn't mind, the Christians running, have been closed down by the fundamentalist Shiites. All the liquor stores in Iraq before were run by Christians. So the Christians now in Syria are looking at the same thing. So, who is going to come in next? Now, if they overthrow Assad, all this stability we have now, if they bring in somebody who will be under Khomeini, then all hell breaks loose. So that's another threat there. What about the Christians? And a lot of them are living already, believing that something is going to happen. Now, what is going to happen is this. There have been negotiations in the United Nations. Kofi Annan has gone there and talked to Assad and said, okay, let's sign agreement and all this. But my hunch is this. There will be no agreement. There will be no diplomatic settlement to that conflict. It's going to end up on who is strongest militarily.
And Syria seems to be the strongest militarily.
Exactly. Syria has a very powerful army. It wouldn't be like the army of Gaddafi. Syria has almost 500,000 people on arms. Under arms, with a very sophisticated, equipment supplied by the Soviet Union. And the Chinese and the Russians are very firmly in support of Bashar al-Assad because they see this as an encroachment on their sphere of influence.
And so the last half minute that we have here, Dr. Madu, Assad is sort of in a good position, and he recognizes that he can continue to kill people at will because it's more difficult for anybody to really unite against him. Would that be a correct assessment in terms of what's going on?
Absolutely, because the international community now is split. There can be no unanimous vote in the Security Council with China and Russia abstaining. The kind of resolution we had in Libya, where China and Russia supported, now both of them said there's no way they're going to support any move against Bashar al-Assad.
And Dr. Madu, let me thank you for bringing that excellent information by, and let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you, and good morning.